The first time I saw Trina Bradshaw marching up my driveway with her clipboard, phone already recording, I knew she was trouble. She had that tight-lipped, overly lipsticked frown and the kind of haircut that's been weaponized by every HOA tyrant across America. And as the self-proclaimed president of the Brookhaven Lakes HOA, she made it her mission to make everyone else miserable. I'm Amos Patterson, retired Coast Guard, part-time mechanic, full-time fisherman. I don't drink, don't cause trouble, and I keep my yard cleaner than a hospital floor. But none of that mattered to Trina. All she saw was the 20-foot fishing boat parked neatly beside my garage. My pride and joy. Legal, registered, and sitting exactly where the bylaws said it could be, Trina didn't care. "This is a violation," she said, tapping her phone screen like she was writing a ticket. "That thing is an eyesore and it lowers property values." "It's called a boat," I said, leaning on the fence, arms crossed, "and it's been here for 3 years. You never had a problem with it before." "I wasn't president before," she said, voice full of fake authority, "and I've decided it's got to go. I've got the bylaws right here in the garage, Section 9, Paragraph 4. Boats are allowed on side property as long as they're registered and covered." She ignored me and stormed off, muttering something about taking this to the next level. The next morning, 2 sheriff deputies showed up at my door. "Mr. Patterson?" one asked. "We got a report about an abandoned vehicle and possible hazardous materials." I blinked. "You mean my boat?" They looked at it, then back at me. "Yeah, sorry about this. We're required to respond when we get a report like that." I walked them around the boat, showed them the fishing gear, the paperwork, even the insurance card. After 10 minutes, they apologized and left. By the end of the week, she'd called the cops 4 more times. Suspicious activity, illegal dumping, unregistered trailer, noise complaints, all of it bogus. Every time the officers were polite but increasingly annoyed, I started keeping a notebook. Dates, times, what they said, what they checked. I installed a security camera that covered my driveway and the side of the house. And just to be safe, I emailed myself photos of the boat setup every other day. Then came the kicker. One Thursday afternoon, I was working on the trailer lights when a patrol car pulled up fast. This time, the officer was different, stern, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Patterson," he said, "we need to ask you to come down to the station to give a statement." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "Miss Bradshaw reported that you threatened her with a firearm." My blood ran cold. "That's a lie. We're just collecting statements right now, but if you could cooperate, we'd appreciate it." I handed him the footage from the security cam. Plain as day, there was Trina pacing in front of my property the day before, yelling at the boat, but I never came outside. Never even opened the door. The officer watched it, then whistled low. "You got more of this, 3 weeks worth," I said. "You might want to check your call logs too." His eyes narrowed. "Hang tight, I'll be back." I didn't know it then, but everything was about to blow wide open. By Saturday morning, the knock on my door was sharp and deliberate. I opened it to find Deputy Morales, the same officer who'd reviewed my security footage, standing alongside a tall man in a navy suit, clean-shaven, badge clipped to his belt, eyes scanning everything without a blink. "Mr. Patterson," Morales said, "this is Investigator Langston from the county attorney's office." Langston gave a short nod. "We need to ask you a few more questions about the calls made to law enforcement concerning your property." I stepped aside and waved them in. "You might want to bring a notepad. This is going to take a while." They followed me into the den, where I'd already started laying things out on the dining table. Printed screenshots from the security feed, logs from my incident notebook, a USB drive with time-stamped footage. I'd even printed out a copy of the HOA's bylaw section governing vehicle storage, highlighted in yellow. Langston took a seat, flipping through the material. "Mind walking me through this from your perspective?" I pointed to the calendar page I'd tacked to the wall. "That's the day she first claimed I threatened her. If you watch the video," "I already have," Langston interrupted. We pulled your footage from that day. There's no contact between you and Miss Bradshaw, verbal or otherwise. What we're trying to determine now is if she's engaged in a pattern of knowingly filing false police reports. Morales added, dispatch records indicate she's made 47 separate calls concerning your residence since the start of the year. 47, I repeated, eyebrows lifting. I figured maybe 20. Langston's tone was neutral but clipped. Almost all of them cite safety threats, criminal activity, or code violations. None resulted in citations or charges. We've also reviewed complaints she filed against other residents, 11 more cases, but yours is the most extreme. I leaned against the edge of the table. So what happens now? Langston glanced at Morales. We're opening a formal investigation. Falsifying police reports is a criminal offense. If it's proven she did so with intent to harass or manipulate community policy, that escalates the charges. She's got the HOA board wrapped around her finger, I said. I know for a fact she threatened my neighbor into removing a swing set from his backyard. Said it violated aesthetic integrity. It was a plastic jungle gym. She threatened anyone else? Langston asked, already scribbling in his pad. I nodded. The Gutierrez family, 2 doors down. She told them their daughter's wheelchair ramp was unsightly and warned them she'd fine them into foreclosure. Morales shook his head. That's vile. Langston stood. We'll be speaking with your neighbors. If they're willing to go on record, that will help build the case. As they left, I caught sight of Trina across the street, watering her petunias with practiced innocence. Her eyes met mine for half a second before flicking away. She had no idea what was coming. By Tuesday, Brookhaven Lakes buzzed like a kicked anthill. Langston and 2 uniformed officers canvassed the street, knocking on doors and taking statements. I watched from my front porch as the Gutierrez family stood on the sidewalk for nearly 40 minutes, talking with the investigator. Mrs. Gutierrez looked like she hadn't had a peaceful night's sleep in months. When she turned to me, her eyes were glassy but grateful. Later that afternoon, Langston returned with a folder in hand. We've confirmed a pattern of targeted harassment, misuse of HOA authority, and at least 12 false police reports filed under penalty of perjury, he said. We're recommending felony charges. There'll be an arrest warrant issued by morning. What about the rest of the board? I asked. That's a separate matter. If they acted under her direction, they'll be investigated too. But right now, the focus is on Miss Bradshaw. I'll admit, I didn't sleep much that night. Part of me didn't believe it would really happen. People like Trina always seem to slip through the cracks, smiling their way through scandal and skating past consequences. But just after sunrise, a black and white patrol car rolled to a stop in front of her house. I stood at the edge of my lawn, not gloating, just watching. Trina stepped out in a slate blue robe, trying to look surprised and confused, but her voice pitched higher than usual as she argued with the officers. They didn't bother debating. One read her the charges while the other clicked handcuffs around her wrists. Someone down the block started filming. Morales caught my eye as they loaded her into the car. 47 counts of filing false reports, 2 counts of witness intimidation, 1 count of falsifying evidence. I nodded. Hope she brought her clipboard. The neighborhood didn't go quiet after that, not exactly, but the feeling shifted. People started talking freely on the sidewalks again. Kids rode bikes without being glared off the street. The Gutierrez ramp got a fresh coat of paint, and no one said a word. A week later, a letter arrived from the county clerk's office confirming my statements had been added to the case. Attached was a note from Langston. Thanks to your documentation, we were able to file all charges without delay. If you're willing to testify, we'll contact you during pretrial. I tucked the letter into a folder marked HOA, Evidence. 2 days after that, a special emergency meeting was held in the community center. The remaining board members, clearly shaken, announced they were suspending all enforcement actions until new elections could be held. The vote was unanimous. The floor was opened for resident input. I stood up, cleared my throat. Suggest we add a clause, I said. Require all future HOA board members to undergo third-party ethics training and criminal background checks before taking office. Applause broke out before I even sat down. I didn't run for the board, didn't need to, but I helped write the new bylaws. And when the time came, we replaced every last one of Trina's allies with sensible folks who actually cared about the community instead of HOA power trips. As for Trina, her trial was scheduled for the fall. Last I heard, her attorney was trying to negotiate a plea deal. But with 47 charges, odds weren't in her favor. The boat's still parked right where it's always been covered, registered, and now with a fresh coat of polish. Every time I fire up the outboard, it reminds me what happens when you stand your ground, document everything, and don't let petty tyrants win. The court summons arrived on a Monday, tucked beneath a stack of flyers and coupons in my mailbox. Cream-colored envelope, embossed seal. It was official. Trina Bradshaw's preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. I had been called as a key witness. I spent the next few days organizing the rest of my documentation. I had already handed over most of the footage, but I still had voice memos from neighbors, copies of HOA newsletters where her name was printed under every committee title imaginable, and a spreadsheet I had made to track her patterns, what time she'd patrol the street, which houses she targeted, how often she sent warning letters. The data painted a very clear picture. This wasn't random enforcement, it was obsession. Late Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Investigator Langston. "We need to meet," he said, skipping greetings. "Something's come up." "You're still keeping a record of neighborhood activity, right?" "Always," I said. "What's going on?" "Miss Bradshaw may have violated her release conditions." "I'd like to show you something in person." We met at the local sheriff's substation, where he led me to a back room with a laptop already open. He clicked play on a video clip, grainy footage from a neighbor's Ring camera. The timestamp was from 2 nights earlier. Trina's unmistakable frame crept up to the Gutierrez mailbox just before midnight. She was holding a stack of envelopes. One by one, she slipped them into the slot, looking over her shoulder every few seconds. "Is that her handwriting?" Langston asked, pausing the footage. "I'd bet my outboard motor on it," I said, "but you'll want to check the return address." He nodded. "Already in the lab." Another clip played, this one from down the street, similar scene, different house. "She's been delivering anonymous letters," Langston said, "all unsigned. Some accuse residents of code violations. Others are threatening. She's violating her no-contact order with at least 3 families. We're preparing to file a motion to revoke her bail." I leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "She's not done. She's just gone underground." Langston didn't argue. "If you see anything unusual, keep a record. And stay alert. We believe she's still trying to influence the HOA board from the shadows." I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, a brand new newsletter landed on every doorstep. No return address, no official header, just a plain white sheet folded in thirds. But the content was unmistakably Trina's voice, full of passive-aggressive phrasing like "residents who fail to uphold our community standards" and "certain individuals who create division." It was riddled with thinly veiled warnings. I walked it down to the sheriff's station that afternoon. Langston took one look at it and sighed. "That's enough for the judge," he said. "We're moving forward. You'll want to be at the courthouse early Monday." When Monday arrived, I wore my best navy blazer with the Coast Guard lapel pin still clipped to the left side. The courthouse steps were already crowded with reporters and a few curious neighbors. I caught sight of Mr. Gutierrez standing near the entry doors with his daughter beside him. He gave me a nod of solidarity. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension. Trina sat with her attorney, arms folded tightly, her face a mask of forced composure. She didn't glance my way. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for zero tolerance, called the session to order. The prosecutor laid out the charges methodically. 47 counts of filing false police reports, 2 counts of witness intimidation, and now several counts of violating a no-contact order. When it was my turn to testify, I stuck to the facts. I described the pattern of harassment, the multiple false claims, the evidence I'd compiled. I handed over copies of the anonymous letters. Then I showed the court the spreadsheet, the same one I'd used to track her behavior. "This wasn't enforcement," I said clearly, making sure to look at the judge and not at Trina. "This was targeted harassment, built on personal bias and a desire for control." She used the HOA like a weapon. The defense tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, claiming Trina was just passionate about community aesthetics. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The judge didn't even let the hearing drag on. "Bail is revoked," she said sternly. "The defendant will be remanded to county custody pending trial. The court finds sufficient cause to proceed with all charges, including those recently added." As the bailiff approached, Trina stood abruptly, chair screeching back. "This is a mistake," she said, voice rising. "I was protecting the neighborhood. These people are ungrateful." The judge didn't flinch. "Sit down, Miss Bradshaw." She didn't. That was her final mistake. Trina launched into a tirade about property values and rule breakers, spouting off about how she built this community from the ground up. The bailiff had to physically escort her out, her voice echoing down the hallway as the door shut behind her. The courtroom exhaled. Outside, reporters clustered around the courthouse steps. I didn't stop to give interviews, but I did catch one question as I passed. "What would you say to residents dealing with HOAs like this elsewhere?" I paused just long enough to answer, "Document everything. Know your rights. And don't let fear keep you quiet." That afternoon, the Brookhaven Lakes Community Board held an emergency meeting. This time, it was open to the public. The remaining board members, two of whom had quietly distanced themselves from Trina in recent weeks, proposed a full audit of HOA operations and a temporary suspension of all fines and enforcement actions. I stood near the back, hands in my pockets, while neighbors filtered in and took their seats. Conversations were louder now. People were less guarded. The fear that had hung over the neighborhood like a storm cloud had begun to lift. One of the residents, a retired teacher named Evelyn, stood up and addressed the board. "We need to do more than fix the rules," she said. "We need to fix the culture. No more secret meetings, no more threats in the name of order. We need transparency." The room clapped, not politely, fully, loudly. I hadn't heard that kind of energy in months. A week later, I was invited to help audit the HOA's records. Not as a board member, but as a civilian reviewer. Turns out, Trina had been misusing funds for years, billing the HOA for private security patrols that never existed, ordering beautification supplies from vendors with no traceable addresses, even reimbursing herself for legal consultations that had no receipts. The county's Financial Crimes Unit opened a second investigation. That's when things really unraveled. The HOA's treasurer, a quiet man named Paul Hemmings, resigned the day after the audit began. A subpoena followed him home before the week was out. Investigators found emails threads between Trina and Paul discussing how to reallocate funds to incentivize compliance. The language was vague, but the intent was clear. At the next board meeting, the community voted to dissolve the current HOA leadership entirely. A temporary committee was formed, made up of residents from every corner of the neighborhood: school teachers, veterans, small business owners. People who had no interest in power, only peace. I helped draft the new charter. It included term limits, whistleblower protections, and an independent ethics panel made up of residents with no personal ties to board members. Every financial transaction would be logged and publicly available. No more slush funds, no more unchecked authority. By the time Trina's criminal trial began, Brookhaven Lakes looked nothing like the place she'd tried to control. Kids played basketball in the cul-de-sacs again. The Gutierrez family installed a new ramp with a painted mural on the side. Evelyn started a community garden on the north end of the park, and for the first time in a year, volunteers showed up to help. Trina was convicted on 38 of the 47 charges. The false reports alone carried enough weight for a multi-year sentence. The judge gave her 5 years probation, 6 months in county, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. The final clause of the new charter was simple. No single individual shall hold more than one board position at a time. Checks and balances shall be enforced at all times. It was named the Bradshaw provision. Justice didn't come easy, it never does, but it came. And when I park my boat beside the garage these days, no one complains. If anything, they wave. Some even ask what I caught last weekend. Brookhaven Lakes isn't perfect, but it's honest now. And that's worth more than any rulebook ever written. The courthouse halls were quieter the day the civil trial started, the one that would determine whether the HOA itself could be held liable. The criminal case had already put Trina Bradshaw behind bars and effectively ended her reign, but there were still ripples spreading from her actions. The neighborhood had changed, yes, but damage had been done: financial, reputational, and deeply personal for some. And now, with the evidence piling up, the county had launched a broader probe into the HOA's operations, citing gross negligence and willful misconduct. I wasn't testifying this time. My role had shifted. Now I was one of the plaintiffs. The courtroom was packed with residents from Brookhaven Lakes. Not one of them sat beside the defense table. The board's insurance attorney stood stiff-necked, flipping through contracts and trying not to make eye contact with anyone. The judge, a different one this time, had already glanced through the preliminary filings and didn't look pleased. "The court has reviewed the claims submitted by the plaintiffs," he began. "We are here today to determine whether the Homeowners Association, as a legal entity, bears financial and administrative responsibility for the actions taken by its former president and its failure to intervene despite multiple resident complaints." Evelyn sat 2 rows ahead of me, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. Her testimony had been submitted in writing. So had the Gutierrez families. The judge read excerpts aloud, lines about ignored warnings, retaliatory threats, and deliberate board inaction. Then he turned to the defense. "You submitted a motion to dismiss on the grounds that the HOA was unaware of Miss Bradshaw's misconduct, yet these internal emails contradict that assertion." He held up a printed document, one I'd acquired during the audit. It was a message from Trina to the treasurer, referencing a strategy to isolate dissenters and quiet non-compliant households before the next annual review. The defense attorney cleared his throat. Those emails were never formally sanctioned by the board. They reflect personal opinions, not organizational policy. The judge's eyes narrowed. And yet they were written using the HOA's official email domain during board meetings and referenced board decisions. That, counselor, makes them admissible and relevant. The attorney tried to pivot. "We contend the financial damages claimed are exaggerated. The plaintiffs experienced inconvenience, perhaps, but no demonstrable financial loss." That was the moment I stood. "Your Honor," I said, "may I speak directly?" The judge gave a single nod. I stepped into the aisle. "The HOA fined me repeatedly for fabricated violations. Those false reports triggered multiple police visits, which show up in background checks. I've lost 2 rental applicants for my guest house because of it. That's verifiable income. But this isn't just about money, it's about trust. About safety. Families were harassed, my neighbors were threatened into silence, and the board did nothing because they benefited." The judge held up a hand. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson, that will be noted." He recessed for deliberation. When he returned, the decision was swift. The court finds the Brookhaven Lakes Homeowners Association legally liable for civil damages resulting from its negligence, lack of oversight, and complicity in the actions of its former president. A restitution fund will be established. There was no applause, just quiet relief. Justice had landed again, but this time it came with financial consequences. In the weeks that followed, the HOA's insurer started processing disbursements. Residents who had been fined illegally or harassed into altering their homes received payments. The Gutierrez family used theirs to install a concrete ramp with full railings and a decorative mosaic. Evelyn donated hers to the community garden, using it to build a shed and irrigation system. As for me, I used the money to finish restoring the second-hand skiff I'd bought the year before. She'd been sitting behind the garage under a tarp, waiting patiently. A little sanding, a new coat of marine-grade paint, and she looked like she'd seen open water just yesterday. One morning, while I was tightening the last bolts on the motor mount, I heard footsteps on the gravel. I looked up to see a man in a brown suit holding a clipboard, not HOA. This one wore the insignia of the county planning department. "Mr. Patterson?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm following up on a grant you submitted. The community resilience proposal." I stood up, wiping my hands. "Didn't think that would go anywhere." "Well, it did. The county's approved partial funding. You'll get materials for the shoreline cleanup plus signage and benches. We'd like Brookhaven Lakes to serve as a pilot for our neighborhood rebuild initiative." I let out a low whistle. "That's unexpected." "We reviewed the court records. This neighborhood went through hell and came out stronger. That's the kind of story we want to support." Later that month, volunteers gathered at the lake's edge. Parents brought their kids. Veterans brought their tools. Someone even brought a food truck. We built benches, cleared weeds, and installed signs that read, "Community owned. Resident maintained." At the final board meeting of the year, the new president, a retired librarian named Carla, stood up and read the updated charter. No one interrupted her. No one raised their voice. When she finished, there was a vote to formally dissolve the old enforcement committee and replace it with a mediation board volunteer-based, with no fining powers. Afterward, she approached me near the refreshment table. "There's talk of naming the South Trail after you, you know," she said. I shook my head. "Don't need that. You sure? People want to remember who stood up." "It wasn't just me," I said, pouring a cup of coffee. "It was everyone who stopped being afraid at the same time," she smiled. "Still. You were the first to say enough." I didn't answer, just looked out the window at the lake. Sunlight caught the water in long, golden ribbons. A couple of kids skipped stones near the shore. The Gutierrez girl rolled along the new path with her service dog trotting beside her. No more patrols. No more letters, just peace. Months passed. Seasons turned. And one spring afternoon, as I was backing the boat into the water for the first trip of the year, a pickup pulled up beside me at the dock. A man climbed out, broad-shouldered, denim shirt, clean boots. "You Amos?" he asked. "That's me." He held out a hand. "Name's Doyle, just bought a place on Red Fern. Folks said to talk to you if I wanted to know how things work around here." I took his hand. "Well, Doyle, first thing to know, we don't do power trips anymore. Second thing, bring your own bait." "I don't share mine," he laughed. "Fair enough." We launched together that day, lines cast out, motors humming in rhythm. And as we floated there in the quiet, I realized something. The fight had been worth it, not because I won, but because the